The words hit Marcus like a slap across the face in the crowded upscale restaurant, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Cheap. She had called him cheap, her voice dripping with disgust as she stared at the bill he had quietly suggested they split. The embarrassment burned through his chest, not because of the accusation itself, but because of everything she didn't know, everything he had been carrying alone for the past 3 years. He reached into his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly as they closed around his phone, and in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything between them. Marcus had met Jennifer at a mutual friend's wedding 6 months earlier. She was radiant, confident, the kind of woman who commanded attention when she walked into a room. He was quieter, more reserved, working as a middle school teacher while pursuing his master's degree in education on evenings and weekends. Their connection had been instant, or so he thought. She laughed at his jokes, seemed genuinely interested in his passion for helping underprivileged kids. And for the first time in years, Marcus allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved something good in his life after everything he had been through. Their relationship developed quickly. Jennifer introduced him to her friends, sophisticated professionals who worked in finance and law, people who dined at restaurants where Marcus would normally never set foot. He noticed how she would sometimes glance at his worn jacket or his 5-year-old car, but he told himself it didn't matter. Love wasn't about material things, he believed. Love was about connection, understanding, being there for each other when it counted. He had learned that lesson the hard way. Tonight was supposed to be special. Jennifer had been hinting about this new French restaurant for weeks, the kind of place with cloth napkins and wine lists that read like novels. Marcus had been hesitant, calculating his budget in his head, but he wanted to make her happy. He always wanted to make her happy. So he made the reservation, put on his best shirt, the one without any frayed cuffs, and picked her up with flowers he could barely afford. The dinner had been pleasant enough. Jennifer ordered the most expensive items on the menu without hesitation, a filet mignon that cost more than Marcus spent on groceries in a week, a bottle of wine that made his stomach clench when he saw the price. He ordered modestly, as he always did, a pasta dish that seemed reasonable, water instead of wine. He listened to her talk about her latest promotion, her upcoming trip to the Bahamas with her girlfriends, her plans to redecorate her apartment. He smiled and nodded, pushing down the anxiety that gnawed at him every time the waiter brought another course. When the bill arrived, Marcus looked at the total and felt his heart sink. $247. He did the mental math instantly, the way he always did now. That was almost his entire grocery budget for the month. That was the amount he usually sent home. That was money he didn't really have to spend. He took a deep breath and suggested, as gently as he could, that maybe they could split it this time, just this once. The change in Jennifer's expression was immediate and devastating. Her eyes went cold, her mouth twisted into something ugly. She pushed back from the table slightly, as if he had suddenly become contaminated. The word came out like venom, cheap. She said it again, louder, explaining to him and anyone within earshot how embarrassing it was to be out with a man who couldn't even pay for dinner. How she should have known better than to date someone who drove an old Honda and wore the same jacket every week. How her friends had warned her about teachers and their pathetic salaries. If you believe in kindness, in giving people a chance before judging them, in the power of compassion and understanding, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell because stories like this remind us why empathy matters in a world that's often too quick to judge. Now let's continue with what happened next. Marcus sat frozen as her words washed over him. Other diners were staring now. Some with pity, some with curiosity, some with that particular kind of schadenfreude that comes from witnessing someone else's humiliation. He could feel his face burning, his hands shaking. For a moment, he wanted to just pay the entire bill, apologize, do anything to make this moment end. That's what the old Marcus would have done. The Marcus who always made himself smaller, who always absorbed other people's pain and disappointment. But something shifted inside him. Maybe it was the weeks of exhaustion catching up with him. Maybe it was the memory of why he lived the way he did. Maybe it was just the final straw after 6 months of feeling like he was never quite enough for her. Whatever it was, Marcus pulled out his phone with steady hands and placed it on the table between them. He didn't say anything at first. He simply unlocked the screen and turned it toward her. Jennifer looked confused, then annoyed, clearly ready to launch into another tirade about his rudeness. But then her eyes focused on what he was showing her, and slowly the color drained from her face. On the screen was his banking app, showing his recent transactions. Jennifer's eyes scanned the list, and Marcus watched as understanding began to dawn. Monthly payment to St. Jude Children's Hospital, $500. Monthly payment to Riverside Nursing Home, $800. Weekly grocery delivery to an address she didn't recognize, $150. Monthly payment to a scholarship fund, $300. Transfer to someone named Sarah, $600. The list went on and on. Transaction after transaction, all outgoing, barely. Anything coming in beyond his modest teaching salary. Marcus's voice was quiet when he finally spoke, so quiet that Jennifer had to lean in to hear him. He told her about his sister Sarah, who had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 3 years ago. He told her about how Sarah's insurance had maxed out, how she couldn't work anymore, how she had 2 kids to feed and a mortgage she couldn't pay. He told her about the $600 he sent her every single month, sometimes more when emergencies came up, which they often did. He told her about his mother, living in that nursing home because Alzheimer's had stolen her memories and her ability to care for herself. He told her about the $800 he paid each month to keep her in a facility that actually treated its residents with dignity, where the staff knew her name and held her hand when she got confused and frightened. He told her about his student Jamal, a brilliant kid from a broken home who had no money for college applications, no computer to write essays on, no one to believe in him except for Marcus. He told her about the scholarship fund he had started 3 years ago, putting in whatever he could spare, slowly building something that might give kids like Jamal a fighting chance. He told her about St. Jude's, where his best friend's daughter had been treated for leukemia when she was 7. She had survived, and Marcus had promised himself he would donate every month for the rest of his life to help other families who found themselves in that nightmare. Marcus swiped to another screen, showing Jennifer a photo. It was him, thin and exhausted, standing in a hospital room next to a little girl with no hair. She was smiling despite everything, holding up a drawing she had made. That was 3 years ago, Marcus explained, right before his whole life had changed, right before he had learned what really mattered. Jennifer's face had gone through a journey of emotions, shock and shame and something that might have been regret. She opened her mouth to speak, but Marcus held up his hand. He wasn't finished. He told her about the groceries he bought every week for Mrs. Patterson, his elderly neighbor who lived on Social Security and cat food when money got tight. He told her about the school supplies he bought for his students who couldn't afford them, the field trip fees he quietly paid for kids whose parents couldn't, the winter coats he anonymously donated to the school's clothing closet every year. He explained that, yes, he could afford to take her to expensive restaurants every week if he wanted to. He could buy a new car, new clothes, go on vacations. He could live the way her friends lived, the way she expected him to live. But every dollar he spent on luxury was a dollar he couldn't send to his sister, couldn't use to keep his mother comfortable, couldn't give to a child who needed it more than he needed a fancy meal. Marcus looked directly into Jennifer's eyes as he spoke his final words. He told her that he wasn't cheap. He was just clear about his priorities. He had learned the hard way that life was short and unpredictable, that the people you love can be taken from you or changed by circumstances beyond anyone's control. He had learned that real wealth isn't measured in what you own or where you eat, but in what you give, who you help, and how you show up for the people who need you. He paid for his half of the meal, leaving enough cash on the table to cover his portion plus a generous tip for their server, who had witnessed the entire scene. Then he stood up, pocketed his phone, and looked down at Jennifer one last time. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face, but Marcus felt nothing but a strange sense of peace. As he walked out of that restaurant, leaving Jennifer sitting alone at the table, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. His phone buzzed almost immediately. It was a text from Sarah, a photo of his niece and nephew doing homework at their kitchen table, with a message, "Thank you for everything, Uncle Marcus. We love you so much." He smiled, the tightness in his chest finally easing. The story of that night spread the way stories do. Someone at a nearby table had overheard everything and posted about it online, a vague story about witnessing someone being called cheap, only to discover they were actually incredibly generous. It went viral, as these things sometimes do, and Marcus found himself dealing with unexpected attention. People reached out wanting to contribute to his scholarship fund. His principal called him into her office, not to reprimand him, but to tell him the school had received several anonymous donations in his name. His students made him cards thanking him for all the small things he did that they had noticed but never mentioned. Jennifer tried to reach out several times, long apologetic texts that Marcus read but never answered. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. He had learned that too. Not every relationship is meant to last. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone go so they can learn and grow on their own. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to look deeper before judging someone, if it inspired you to think about what really matters in life, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Leave a comment telling us about a time when someone surprised you by their hidden kindness, or when you learned that things aren't always what they seem. Months later, Marcus still taught his students with the same passion. He still sent money to Sarah, paid for his mother's care, contributed to St. Jude's. He still bought groceries for Mrs. Patterson and donated coats to the clothing closet. And he still drove his old Honda, wore his comfortable jacket, and felt absolutely no shame about any of it, because Marcus had learned the most. Important lesson of all, that true richness has nothing to do with what's in your wallet, and everything to do with what's in your heart. And no amount of expensive dinners could ever be worth sacrificing the people and causes that actually mattered. The real treasure, he had discovered, was in giving, not in impressing. And that was worth more than all the fancy restaurants in the world.